Hello, episode 63. It's Retro Week. It's birth months. We're closing out April with their last retro show. This should have been done last week, but someone slept and didn't answer their phone because it's always silent. It might be the guy to my right if you're looking at the screen. So I'm Mike.
I'm Daniel.
And I'm Vincent, or it might be the guy to my bottom or my left. You never know.
I mean, it might be the guy whose name begins with a V and ends with Incent.
Or it could
be a detective. Figure it out.
Starts with D and ends with Ann.
I don't sleep.
That we know you sleep.
Yes.
Dan has a bedtime.
So with that, yeah, he's the only one of us with one. So we did I think we kind of indirectly done this before, where one of us got, I think, a year they were born, but not the month. But this time I remember way back when we did a retro show last year, we're like, oh, it'll be fun to do birth months. So we decided to close out the month of April with that. And it's some varied results here. Like Dan ended up getting smack dab in the middle of Zero Month during 0 hour for DC. So all of his DC books are zero issues, for example. We chose 2 Marvel and 2 DC, and like our usual setup, we designate one book that we all had to read. But of course, we were all free to read whatever, but with timing constraints, that usually doesn't always work out. So that's why we have the you must read this kind of John in there. So overall, before we begin, guys, how did you feel about the pool of books you got? I kind of felt like it was harder to pick the more I went on. It was kind of an up and down kind of road to pick.
I think I was happy with most of my picks. One of them is definitely not a good comic, but I kind of picked it for stupidity reasons.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of mine were, like you said, slim pickings. Not a lot to go off of, really. But one of them I had to pick because he's my boy. So.
Yeah, I mean, like Mike said, Dan's.
There were better options for you for that Marvel month.
Yeah, I mean, Dan's DC picks are kind of limited in scope, at least. But I feel like even like, I mean, so we're all born in 94, 95, which is the gimmick we're going with here. And that's like pretty deep into the era, past the speculator boom, like right before Marvel's bankruptcy and everything. I'm pretty sure Mike and I, or no, I don't know, we're not at Heroes Reborn yet. But even still, like even in like the depths of the 90s, even from Marvel and DC, there's almost always at least 1 or 2 books that were still solid. So like, so we're just picking 2 Marvel, 2 DC. Like, if you want to pick the good ones, there were the good ones. Now, we didn't all pick the good ones, which we'll get into.
Right, and with that, I mean, I think you did pick a good one, but we'll get into it when we deliberate. But we'll start off with the book we all had to read. Vince had Batman: Legends of the Dark Knight number 74.
Yes, this is written and drawn by Ted McKeever. It's part 1 of, I believe, a 2-part arc called Engines. And so Legends of the Dark Knight, it's just random anthology Batman. Very early on, the first like 50 issues or so were explicitly supposed to be set early in Batman's career, or maybe that's just how it landed, but that's what they were. And then as it went on, it was just like random Batman. And Ted McKeever is mostly known for his independent work, but he had a run on Doom Patrol, never collected, and other little spots. He'd do like Elseworlds stories. He did like a trilogy of Elseworlds where one is Superman, one's Batman, one's Wonder Woman, and they're like inspired by, I think, like industrial design or like Art Deco. I'm not sure what. And he'd do like fill-ins and things like that. He has a very unique style, and here he's going for like a bit of an industrial aesthetic, I think. So our main character here, his name is Eustace. He's a very depressed, nihilist guy. I believe this is him taking the train into work every day because we see this train reappearing but it might just be, showing that as it goes through narration. But he lives in Gotham City and he works at a slaughterhouse. He's a bystander to a shooting at one point that Batman fails to stop, or at least fails to stop, the murder. And I don't think he really gets or no, he does get the shooter, I believe, but he doesn't stop the kill. And Eustace's obsession with death, because he works in a slaughterhouse and he's a creepy dude, causes him to just decide, I'm going to become a serial killer. And his he is a crazy guy, but like his motivation doesn't fully make sense to me. It's something about like he's trying to stop the people that would prevent death in Gotham by killing them. It doesn't make that much sense. And the targets that he chooses, aren't fully explained on how they tie into that idea. So that's where I think like the setup is all right, but it doesn't like there's no reasoning to exactly who he's killing. Batman is always one step behind him. He finds the bodies after the fact. And at the very end of this issue, Eustace fails in killing someone, and he gets kicked onto train tracks. But then Batman comes and saves him. And Batman is drawn like in a very creepy, horror, fearsome way. And there's tons of narration in here from the main character's perspective, and it's quite poetic and like talking about industry and death and things like that. The next issue, as you would expect, is where more stuff goes down and he more directly confronts Batman and things like that. But I think it's cool. Like I said, McKeever, super unique art style, and even the writing here kind of matches his art. And for a 2-issue, I mean, this is you have to you pretty much have to view this as out of continuity. Though I guess you could stuff it in, and you just take the Batman portrayal as metaphorical and everything. For 2 issues, this is a really cool little story.
Yeah, I agree. I love how grimy and dirty Ted McKeever's art is, but also with that, it's very kind of hyper exaggerated. What really brings it out to me are these very thick black lines that he has on buildings and on characters that are just really pop with the color here that make it much more unlike like any other Batman book you'd be reading at this time. And it Legends of the Dark Knight, that's the book where you're going to get more things out of the ordinary because it's Painted is the more prestige book. Normally every book was, the name of the name of the writer and the artist with the whatever the name of the story was plastered right on the front cover to make it more of that prestige look to it. But I really liked how this looks here. It's kind of got like a Nightcrawler taxi driver kind of vibe a little bit in different ways. And I think it's a rare thing for me where I like the issue so much where I actually did go and read the next one to see how this finishes, where I wanted a little bit more of how Ted McKeever paints Batman in the next issue, and he kind of has like this holy knight look to him a little bit, which is definitely an interesting depiction from outside the norm of what you'd see. But I think for me, the art stayed with me here and carried the story, and just like I said, the thick black lines here really make everything pop, and I really really like this.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what you guys said, I mean, yeah, the art's really good. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Jeff Lemire's like Essex County. I'm not sure if that's like a good comparison or not, but like just like the way the faces are drawn and like the proportions of the bodies, it's very like, I don't know, it's just very like rough, but yeah, it's still really, really crisp and clean in certain parts too. I mean, the colors, especially like the blood in the beginning of the issue, like it's very vibrant and just, I don't know, it just really pops. But I mean, aside from that, like you said, I mean, this story, I would say pretty good. I don't really have a lot of exposure with like this, like, I guess this, like you said, this is kind of like a little like divergent path off of like Batman's main story, but like, I thought this was pretty cool. The character was awesome. Yeah, that was a good pick, Vince.
I thought you were gonna say you had no long history of reading Batman, which I know is false at this point, but I'm happy you steered you clear of that. But you do have our next book, Dan, which is a Venom book.
Yes. So what 90s birthday month thing would be complete without a Venom book. So I decided to go with Venom Knights of Vengeance #3, written by Howard Mackey, art by Ron Lim, inks by Al Milgram. So Venom and Vengeance have found themselves teleported to the middle of the South American rainforest. Lost in thought, Venom is struck by a stun beam fired by Cass, leaving Venom vulnerable to attack from him and his colleague Raiden. So, first time seeing a lot of these characters, obviously. I don't really have a lot of exposure with Venom comics. But he is then blasted into a nearby river and swept down a waterfall. Meanwhile, others are hunting for Vengeance. They blast the tree that Vengeance is hiding behind. However, on the other side is Michael Battolino, I believe that's what he pronounced his name, which is Vengeance's alter ego. So they don't recognize him in his human form. The two members of the Stalkers depart. While their backs are turned, we get Vengeance transforming himself back into his, alias, I guess, or his character. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., we kind of have some other stuff, I guess, rolling over from the previous issue. These characters, Beck and Heather, are still prisoners within the alien ship hidden in the Colorado Rockies. So after destroying the robot, Sean Knight begins freeing the women so that they can get out. And then going back to the waterfall, Raiden decides to give up on finding Venom's body, but Cass doesn't want to stop until he can wear Venom's head on his belt. So pretty savage stuff going on here. After a struggle, Venom learns that Cass has been completely absorbed by the alien entity possessing. Knowing that he no longer has to hold back, Venom decapitates the techno-organic beings. So again, kind of just giving them an excuse to, I guess, viciously destroy a character without committing absolute murder in a Marvel comic. The Stalker trio absorbs Cass's life force, increasing their own power. As Trent and Raiden fly off to search for their prey, they leave Briggs alone to be ambushed by Vengeance, who manages to blow Briggs into pieces with a concentrated blast of hellfire. Venom and Vengeance hatch a plan to get out of South America using a drug dealer's aircraft because, why not? Going back here to Colorado, we get the three characters escaping, and they're attacked by these techno-organic materials on the ship. So again, going back to Vengeance and Venom, we see that they're trying to commandeer this aircraft when they're attacked by Trent, again, part of these Stalkers. Vengeance then comes to help Venom, tossing Trent into the airplane. So pretty crazy stuff there, and is seemingly destroyed in a blast. So at that moment, Vengeance motorcycle arrives on the scene, allowing them to make their own long trip back to America. Trent is destroyed, apparently, and he emerges from the rubble after they have left, intended to continue the hunt. So this is definitely some crazy 90s stuff, some really great, crazy art going on here. Yeah, like I said, I haven't read a lot of Venom stuff, like at least the solo stuff. Obviously, I read McFarlane stuff from Amazing Spider-Man, but yeah, this is some crazy 90s stuff. I keep saying, I think I say crazy a lot in this review, but I know Vince wrote some notes here, so I don't know if he wants to chime in on this.
Yeah, sure. I think the suits that the Stalkers wear, I don't know. I don't think they're suits. They've been turned into this. It's like a weird techno-organic virus looking thing going on. It's kind of neat looking. I like Ron Lim draws a really beefy Venom, but overall, this is not great looking Ron Lim compared to something like a Teeny Gauntlet or like the Peaks of Silver Surfer. All of his faces on the humans look bad, and it's just really iffy. And you see some supporting characters here that don't originate in this series because Venom basically had an ongoing series through the 90s. It was just weirdly split into this string of miniseries. This is like the sixth one out of 16 total. And I've always said really only the first one is good. And then the first 3 to 4 of them are not trash. So, I mean, there's some interesting things to look at here, but this is pretty trash.
Makes sense. You're on mute.
Oh, thank you. I hit the button though. Um, yeah, I mean, nowhere to go but up. I think after the way we leave that, but I'll go into Superman number 105. Dan Jurgens, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez on art, which was the main reason why I chose this. The second being that this is a team up between Superman and Kyle Rayner, and we open up here with some big old cheesecake with Kyle Rayner drawing a nude model at his apartment that he has over. But he's like quickly zapped away by two beings that are watching over him. Turns out they're Siphon and Dreadnought, who've kidnapped Kyle to get revenge for the last time they were beaten by Superman and Green Lantern. Though last time it would have been Superman and Hal Jordan, but they think Kyle is Hal Jordan's son because he looks different, since they haven't met Kyle before. So we like hard cut away from that to the new WGBS reporter Jimmy Olsen, who is recovering from the he was covering the maiden voyage of the new cruise liner christened Laura in the name of Superman's mother from Metropolis in Hobbs Bay. And Superman's there to also for the event. And, all seems well until a giant robot comes out of the water and picks up the boat, which is where Superman turns his attention. And he also notices Kyle fall into the bay unconscious and heads in to rescue him. Superman's powers are also weakening because apparently Siphon's powers, I had to look it up because I have no idea who this character was. He apparently can take away Superman's powers through like telepathy. So Kyle thinks on the spot and constructs a giant mech suit for Superman to pilot, so he can focus on helping out there. Then turns out the villains are controlling the robot that they're also fighting. And once the mental block was cut off, the robot comes to his senses, and he's like a sentient being. And he remembers Superman and Green Lantern from the time he was saved by them back in Adventures of Superman number 473. So bang, the day is saved as Superman gives props to Kyle in the post fight interview with Jimmy Olsen covering the scene, and everything's all fine and dandy. Overall, it's a fine issue of 1995 Superman. You still got Dan Jurgens writing. I really would have thought that the Garcia Lopez art would have been more his signature, DC style we'd come to, but I honestly think his art here looks a lot more like Dan Jurgens' Superman than himself, which is the big thing. So I don't know if in the 90s Garcia Lopez changed a little bit, because normally when I think Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, I think of his Superman from like, the Bronze Age, like the big DC posters and everything designs. Those are kind of his looks that you go forward with, and the timeless classic designs of the DC characters. But here it looks very much like Dan Jurgens to me. But overall, a very fine issue of Superman. Vince read all of these, so he'll chime in here in just a second.
Yeah, this was fun. I think it's neat to see Jimmy working for WGBS, the television station. I know that's something that Clark was doing in the Bronze Age before Crisis for a while. I'm sure maybe, especially in the 90s, this entire 10 years of Dan Jurgens, maybe Clark has done that again since then. The giant ship flying through the air into the city, pretty crazy. And then there's a mecha fight thanks to Kyle Rayner's inventive use of the ring. And yeah, that's kind of my take on the Garcia Lopez art. When I saw the credits, I was like, ooh, very excited. But really, this just kind of comes across as like any other bubblegum house style 90s Superman issue, which is not a bad thing, but it's not remarkable. And just for dumb trivia, starting with the next issue of this series, and then whatever next in the triangle probably is the Trial of Superman arc, which is like, I don't know, for some reason Superman gets put on trial by aliens for the destruction of Krypton because he's tangentially responsible.
Right. And then I'll hand it over to you for some Peter David Hulk, right?
Yes. Issue 432. We are 100 issues into the Peter David run on this title, about 3/4 through his entire run. And, that's not counting annuals, spin-offs like Future Imperfect, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the final issue of what is actually a pretty short run by Liam Sharp. He only does like 6 to 8 issues. So what's going on here is that there's a homeless population in the sewers of New York, and they're kind of like leader / protector is Abomination. And the NYPD is trying to help them out / get them the hell out of there. by, of course, bringing guns down there to rout them out. And at this point, Abomination has been shot by one of the cops, so he's freaking out, and there's a big fight. And his kind of outsider status and protecting the downtrodden, and also his characterization here is kind of parallel to Hulk. It's pretty interesting interpretation of Abomination because, back in the Bronze Age and stuff, he's just stupid villain. And then, and like, historically, I'm pretty sure even, or I don't know, I might be wrong. I think he usually was smart. He wasn't like dumb like Hulk. But then as you go onward, after the Peter David run, basically probably the next major Abomination thing. Well, wait. He kind of kills someone in Hulk, and then Hulk gets revenge for it in the Paul Jenkins run. Blah blah. Whatever. Let me stop talking about Abomination's entire history. So, like I said, cops shoot him, so that creates a huge mess, and Hulk gets in the middle of it. And this is the era of the Smart Hulk. So the fight ends up in the Daily Bugle lobby, and Jameson makes a joke about clones, since Abomination is, kind of looks like the Hulk. And I don't know if that's Peter David throwing shade as a former Spidey writer in the thick of the Clone Saga, which we didn't pick any Clone Saga books for this show. But you can hear us talk about every Clone Saga book on Saga the Clone Saga. Or it might be just Peter David, teasing, no malicious intent. A news helicopter gets involved, and Hulk ends up saving the people and letting Blonsky possibly get away, rather than stopping Blonsky and having people potentially die in the helicopter crash. That's the story here. This is the second part of a two-parter. Liam Sharp's Hulk and Abomination are both hyper-muscular and in a super veiny way. It's one of those takes on the Hulk. Like, I think it was Mark Silvestri who returned to Marvel and did a short Hulk run with Jason Aaron. Not a very remarkable run. I don't really like it. But especially on the covers of that, Mark Silvestri drew the Hulk with like arms bigger than his chest. And that's what we get here from Liam Sharp. But and they're inconsistent on every page. And there's like a little bit of Simon Bisley because there's Liam Sharp's style is drastically changed, or at least what he's going for has changed a ton through the years. Early on with like Death's Head, he was all about like hyper detailed, like inspired by a lot of the Image guys, and maybe like a precursor or parallel to what Brian Hitch was doing. And then you get this era where he may have taken influence or maybe just lines up with someone like Simon Bisley. And then obviously later on, his current style. But it's a distinct aesthetic, and I think it's kind of badass. I don't think I'd want it for long term on the Hulk, like tons of issues. But with only 8 issues and a very long, overall run for Peter David, it's a cool little pocket. And he does Man Thing. He does the Man Thing series after this, and I believe actually in his issues on Hulk. And again, there's only 8 of them. I think he does a Man Thing arc. So then it makes sense that he was pulled over to Man Thing. And I was surprised looking at wikis that Liam Sharp has not done, as far as I can tell, a single thing for Marvel since 2003, which is pretty crazy. And the next Hulk artist after Liam Sharp is Angel Medina. And the third omnibus ends basically right after this issue. And that's that. I mean, Peter David Hulk, pretty great. Nice parallels with Abomination, nice action, cool art.
All right. So my first DC issue from October 1994 is Green Arrow #0, written by Kelly Puckett, art by Jim Aparo. So our story opens to Oliver Queen packing up and throwing away his items he used as Green Arrow, as we have 2 federal agents discuss recent events of the superhero, Green Arrow, obviously, including killings and what his career looks like as they consider placing him into the red file. Doesn't sound good. Meanwhile, Oliver crashes his car and ends up waking up at a monastery where he befriends a young man also at the monastery who wants to learn archery from Green Arrow. So we kind of spend the rest of the issue with Green Arrow kind of mentoring this guy Oliver, obviously is very, hesitant to do this and rebuffs his attempts multiple times until one night when the monastery is attacked by men attempting to kill Queen. He's able to fend them off, and I believe this young man helps him as well. So he's able to fend them off, and then he goes off with the young monastery member to find out who it is that sent them. And I guess that's kind of the start of the run. So I thought this was a pretty decent issue story-wise. Vince has a few things he wants to say here, but I thought this was a pretty, for someone, who's trying to get into the character, kind of start off a new status quo. The monastery is interesting setting to do that in, I guess, but I thought it was handled somewhat decently. So what did my co-host think?
Yeah, I don't have that much more to add. This is kind of a weird era where the Mike Grell run ends at issue 80, and then I think it's like 81 to like 90 something is basically this very extended arc called Crossroads, but there's somehow like multiple writers and artists all within this one arc, so I've never fully understood like what was going on editorially there. I don't think this is Jim Aparo's best hour. He also doesn't look great, but he's still No Man's Land stuff we read for a show that we did, and that's a couple years after this. So I don't know what's going on, but I was intrigued to see Jim Aparo on this, but I was not.
And then from Green Arrow number 0, we flash forward 101 issues, but really not that many more. But Chuck Dixon, Rodolfo DiMaggio. So we go from the first appearance of Connor Hawke to the death of his father, Oliver Queen, the original Green Arrow. And this issue just opens up with the death of Ollie. I'm talking like the opening page. To make a long explanation short, Ollie and Superman are caught on this plane that has a bomb, and Ollie's hand is trapped inside this contraption that has it's caught it inside it. And Superman's like, I could save you, but I'd have to, heat vision your arm off. But Ollie's, too stubborn and decides, no, I'll die a hero's death instead. And that, Superman saves the rest of the people, but the thing blows up. Connor and Eddie Fires are on this helicopter, like a couple, overhead watching this all happen. So they see it all go down. So Connor is now fully an orphan. And the rest of the issue is the heroes kind of dealing with the grief of Ollie's death and what it means. And kind of like, it's really disappointing. Like, instead of a big funeral for Oliver Queen, it's a small gathering of heroes in the back of Warrior's Bar. And if you don't know what a Warrior's Bar is, it was a bar in the 90s owned by Guy Gardner at the time he was going by Warrior. And it's Superman offering the eulogy. Like, Hal is Parallax at this point, so he's not there. And Roy Harper, who is Arsenal now, is even late. Like, he's like, oh, I guess I'll show up to this. He like cuts in after the eulogy's over. Batman's not even there. He's in the Batcave with Tim Drake mourning, and basically just has a couple sentences to say. And he's like, yeah, Oliver was a good man, and that was pretty much it. The next big part of this is Connor Hawke going to Dinah Lance, who's Black Canary, to tell her the news, where she quickly discovers that Connor is Ollie's son, and as a gift to him, she gives him the Errol Flynn bow of Robin Hood, where Connor fires an arrow of mourning into the Sherwood Forest to mark where he will bury him, symbolically like the end of the tale of Robin Hood. Overall, it's all right. I like the stuff with Connor and Dinah. That stuff is good, especially with the callback to the bow of Errol Flynn. That's something I believe, at least for me, goes back to the Mike Grell run, and we even see a history of Ollie's life leading up to that. And obviously, Longbow Hunters with Dinah strikes a moment in there. But at the time of DC, it's like, it is kind of a bummer. Roy's Arsenal and carrying guns at this point. He's got that crappy costume. Hal's a villain. So Superman's really the only one there with like Nightwing and a couple Titans and maybe some lesser known JLA members in the back of Warrior's Bar for the eulogy. Is kind of a disappointing moment for, Green Arrow was after the original 7 members of the Justice League, he was the first one that joined after that. So you feel like you'd have a grander send-off for Oliver Queen, and obviously he would be brought back later on by Kevin Smith years later. But overall, Green Arrow 101, it's not the greatest story in terms of, of how it goes down. And I also don't think Rodolfo DiMaggio's art is really the greatest here either. But Vince, I'll have you weigh in.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we've read at least one other kind of Hawk issue at some point for Retro. I mean, this might not be the best showing for it, but I think Rodolfo DiMaggio had some highlights on Green Arrow. Yeah, this definitely has oddities of the era, like, you mentioned some of them, but also Adam is here and has his screwed up memories, because I guess this is while he's the leader of the Teen Titans and de-aged. And I didn't fully understand the status quo Black Canary just out of context just in this, because she's dressed in this like sexy way, basically, where it's like totally not her superhero costume, but she's got the fishnet on, she's got the bodice. Like, it's a little bit, I don't know, it's weird. And then I don't know what she was up to, because her solo series was canceled by this point. I will say it's very interesting that, if you ever come across back issues around like Green Arrow, like 105 to 108 or something like that, the letters pages a couple issues after this are pretty entertaining, because DC went ahead and published some like really angry ones from longtime Ollie fans, and they're pretty funny. And also, one last thing I'll say is that it looks like Amazon put a future date on it and you can't order it. So I don't know if it'll happen, but DC might be coming out with a thick paperback of Green Arrow, which would include Green Arrow number 0. And so 0 follows number 90. So this book would have 0 and then 91 to 101. So it would actually, we read what would be the first and the very last issue of that book if it ever comes out. You can't trust DC, but hopefully it does. I would probably buy it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how we've had this kind of mini. I talked about it when we did our Falcon review earlier this week. We kind of indirectly have kind of had this mini arc of we read stuff with Captain America, but also now we've done the same with kind of early Connor Hawk and Ollie, as we've read some scattered Kevin Smith issues later past that, and then through this. So it's kind of weird how it all worked out, but I'm happy for it, because you can go and kind of piece together a little bit of arcs and we've checked in on every few years to see what's up with Green Arrow. But our next book is it might be Dan's favorite character. He can answer that for himself, though.
Yes. So believe it or not, this is an Iron Man issue that I have not read. So hence the reason why I wanted to put it on this list here. But anyways, guys, the second Marvel book I picked is Iron Man 309, written by Len Kaminsky, art by Tom Morgan. So this is continuing on their fairly lengthy run in the 90s for Iron Man. So we walk into a situation where I guess this character Vortex, I don't know, it's like Vor/Tex, which is really dumb and stupid, but I'm sure there's an explanation for that. But anyway, Vortex and Iron Man have switched bodies, I guess, so they're fighting each other. Tony uses Vortex's lack of understanding of human anatomy and pain, I guess, to overwhelm him, and eventually cause Vortex to delete himself from Tony's body, because as a robot, Vortex can't learn to deal with the pain, so he just decides to get away from it and destroy himself in the process. So, quick resolution to that issue, I guess. So Tony's able to regain his body, only to find out that he is very drunk. I guess Vortex drank a lot in his body and didn't realize what it would do to him. So meanwhile, in China, we get some foreshadowing of the Mandarin playing with his orb called the Heart of Darkness, while we also see he still has the dragon arms, or that's leading up to the Hands of the Mandarin storyline. So that's when he had like dragon, like green arms. They were really weird. Don't want to talk about that. Anyways, Tony strolls back into the office again, and he's actually drunk, and throws up multiple times and asks Miss Arbogast, which is his longtime secretary, to remove all the alcohol from his office or like his study or wherever he. Probably not a good thing to put alcohol in your study, I guess. But anyways, Rhodey is calling Tony about the War Machine armor specs, and Tony's just like, screw you. I don't want to deal with you right now. And Tony just like bitches him out, and Rhodey's like, well, I guess I gotta go put on his armor and just go beat him to a pulp. So if I remember correctly, I think 310 is the issue where it's like the cover where like Iron Man and War Machine are kind of like face to face, like beating the shit out of each other on top of a building or something. Could be wrong, but yeah, this issue, this is, you want to talk about mid 90s. This is definitely one of those representations of it. So I'm curious what Mike, and I know Mike thinks it's trash, but maybe I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I guess I have to start first, but I joke to you and say it's trash, but I'm not high on the issue either. I think the art's all right, but a lot of this is set up, and it's just structurally, I just don't think it's a great issue. I think a lot of it comes with the structure. Like I hate the cover. I don't think it's a good cover at all. It's very quickly resolved how they deal with the villain. I like the stuff with Tony out of costume, but also it's just like we should be further past the point of a relapse. Like it feels like it's a meme, right? Where Iron Man has two stories, where he's addicted to alcohol again, or he's broke, or he's doing something he shouldn't be. And it's like two of the three are in this book, and I'm just like, we should be past this by 1994, but we're not. And even things after this are still going to hit those beat points again and again. So if I have the choice of this or I have the choice of Chris Cantwell's run, I'm taking Cantwell.
Yeah, that's
my thoughts on this.
Yeah,
I mean, no one would ever take this over. I mean, I guess it depends, but that's
no, you're trying to judge it right now. I can see your eyes moving. You're going to try to say that you might take this over Cantwell's run.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's pretty easy to say you take Cantwell over this. I think that's a very obvious statement. But I mean, yeah. First of all, I don't like strongly disagree with you, but the whole relapse thing. The thing is that they introduced that he's an alcoholic, that he has alcoholism. He has like an addiction issue. Way back in, I mean, that's like late 70s, I believe. And so it's going to come up by chance if he ever runs into alcohol. And in this scenario, I mean, like, they wrote it to be this way, but he had no control over it because the stupid robot drank some alcohol while Tony didn't have control over his body. So then when he gets back in his body, it is an addiction. So the fact that the dumb robot drank the alcohol, it does re-trigger his addiction. So like, yeah, I mean, the writer wrote that to like tell that story, but it's not like Tony had, I don't know, never mind. What I'm saying doesn't really matter.
No, I understand what you're saying. I understand. And I guess I'll clarify more. Like, that point I agree with. I think that's an interesting to bring up. I think a big part of it too, though, is that scattered Iron Man issues I have read, it always seems to be one of those three beat path things. So it's, the bad luck of all those run together makes it, diminishing. Or I'm just like, can I read something else where he isn't doing this? That's my issue.
I mean, to be fair, a lot of his like highlight stories, do factor that in. And then, like, I guess it's diminishing returns because I think there hasn't really been a good take on it since like the 80s. But I'm pretty sure we read, Dan, is it 182 for a retro before? The Deliverance issue from Denny O'Neil. I'm pretty sure we read that for retro. But yeah, this issue specifically, I feel like it's almost like false advertising. It's just like a really poorly structured issue, in my opinion. Like if you were reading Iron Man every single month and we read a bunch of issues in a row, I think it would be fine. but especially out of context, like if you randomly picked up this issue, it's really rough because this whole Vortex arc starts in 307. So it's 3 issues here, but it's concluded like, I mean, it might take up more pages, but in the grand, in the pacing of the issue, the villain story is concluded very quickly. So it's like we jump in, we're not given that much context because it was in the previous 2 issues, and then it's immediately wrapped up, and we don't have much information about this villain, and then it's over. And then the like 2/3 of the issue is just prelude with really not much happening, setting up Hands of the Mandarin, which I think is a bloated, stupid crossover, anyways. But yeah, this issue, like the way they break down how to attribute space to each of these 2 arcs, it doesn't feel very balanced, and like I don't know, it's just weird. And I like the art. There are some iffy moments, especially like some of like the rare human movements, but Tony's armor, and I like the Vortex design, and then we get to see Rhodey suiting up, and then a great splash page at the end of him in the suit. So I like this era of Iron Man for sure. But this is kind of nearing. This is nearing the end of my my willingness to bother with it.
I would say I still love this armor. That's for sure.
Yeah, because Hands of the Mandarin directly follows this, and I'm pretty sure the crossing intersects with Iron Man like not too long after this. I think it's around like probably Iron Man like 320. So this is kind of the death knell.
Right.
All right, our next book is Tales of the Marvels: The Wonder Years #1. This is a 2-issue miniseries, I believe, which is kind of weird. So this is one of several loose spin-offs in the wake of the success of Marvels, which was in 1994. And again, I was born in 1995 in August, so that's what we're picking. That's what I picked. And this is written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning and art by Igor Kordy. This is focused on Wonder Man of all characters, the Wonder Years. Very clever naming. Our main character here, though, is Cindy Nuts, because it's just like Marvel's, it's about the superheroes, but it's the focal point from, regular people. And she is a Wonder Man fangirl, and she basically is at a fan group because she was saved by Wonder Man circa Avengers number 198 when they fought Red Ronin, which is actually the exact same moment that the Marvel Snapshots Avengers issue that we read on our regular show takes place, which is kind of weird. She literally moves to LA from New York City to follow Simon, hoping that she'll somehow one time run into him. And she's lucky because she's a secretary at some kind of like talent agency, maybe. It's not 100% clear what they do. And the agency either represents or has some kind of deal with Simon's girlfriend at the time from his 90s solo series. And she almost runs into Simon, but, just barely misses him. But the fan club organizes for him to come speak to them. However, Simon, A, loses an acting gig, and B, the West Coast Avengers are splitting up. So she may never get her chance to meet him. They decide instead to storm the West Coast Avengers compound like stalkers, only to basically get caught up in the events of the first issue of Force Works, where Wonder Man freaking dies. Force Works, as Dan knows, was also written by Abnett and Lanning, and in fact, they wrote like the last, maybe only the final issue of West Coast Avengers, transitioning over. I'm actually not 100% certain if this issue is painted. That's what you expect from Marvels, or if it's some other kind of media. Like, I'm honestly like half guessing if it's like maybe markers or something, but it looks very muddy and basically terrible. At least in the mainstream, really only Alex Ross could pull off painted comics at the time. And honestly, the more I look back at the earlier work and also, read more comics and think more critically. I honestly don't really like Alex Ross comics either. I will give Igor Corti a little bit of credit, not for this issue, but for at least having diverse styles. He was one of the artists on Grant Morrison's X-Men, in that period where Frank Quitely is like, I can't do a monthly book. So they just brought in like tons of artists. And his art on X-Men is always roasted. Like people hate it. But it was super rushed at the time because he was doing multiple monthly books. And one of those was Cable, where at the time it may have already been transformed into Soldier X. And I like his work on Cable. And that's basically my take here. I like Wonder Man. This is about his weird stalker, and it looks terrible. So, not much more to say, but it's like tangentially a Force Works time.
And from that, we go to my all-read book, which is Green Goblin #1. Which it's not the Green Goblin you're thinking of. This is Tom DeFalco and Scott McDaniel. Like I said, this is the all-read. This is the Phil Urich Green Goblin, kind of a pseudo reunion for us, Vince, in Saga, the Clone Saga funsies. As we didn't, and none of us chose a Spider-Man book, but this is the closest thing we get to it. As during Saga, the Clone Saga, I was first exposed to Phil's Goblin, and he was one of the few positives that I took away from that time when we were doing that show. And I was like, oh, well, this is the perfect opportunity to dive first into his first issue, because I think we read him, and it was like a crossover with like issue 4 or something like that. But Phil Urich was recently fired from his job at Kid Video, so one of his friends, Eddie Glazer, gets a local gang leader, Rico the Sicko, to rob the place in retaliation for Phil to try to get back at the business. And Phil, at the same time, is currently working as intern for his uncle Ben Urich, at the Daily Bugle. And Ben is tasking Phil with tracing some data on a book he's working on, chronicling the history of the Green Goblin, at this point being Norman Osborn and Harry Osborn. And Phil's able to impress his uncle and uncover some info on an old warehouse where the lead is that they may be funneling money into. So they head to investigate. The problem here is that he ran into Eddie on the street earlier in the issue, and he told him about everything he was doing and where he was going. Also, I got to give up to Phil repping the 1990s RoboPen hockey sweater in this, so that's another plus for me here that I take away, which I love. So I don't know if Scott McDaniel's a Penguins fan or anything, but I did like that. So we get this kind of cat and mouse game when we get Rico the Sicko and his gang going to the hideout once they hear that there's money there, and Phil and Ben trying to avoid the gang. In like I said, in this kind of game of cat and mouse, Phil ends up stumbling into this chamber that would have been Harry's new Green Goblin costume, and thinking he can scare away again. He gets it, he tries to put it on, but then he gets scared by a rat, which bumps him into the Goblin formula, where it dumps all over him. Anyways, he managed to get out of the get the costume on and scare the guys away, and just maybe he can do some more good with these tools, he thinks to himself. And that's kind of what that's what we're given at the end of our issue. There's some manic writing here, I feel, from DeFalco, where it moves very fast, but for the character's energy, I think it completely works. We just never stop moving at all. Text covers every page, like you're trying to recap for your friend, like I'm doing right now, and I'm running out of breath, trying to tell you everything that's happening here, where your mouth's trying to keep up with your brain. And I like the supporting cast and the setting, though. We get a lot of familiar Spider-Man elements here with an obvious twist. Good supporting cast. I like the setting at the Bugle. Obvious parallel to Uncle Ben for Ben Urich now. I like everything that's going on here. We get a sense that like Phil is insecure and some bumbling 20-something, too. Kind of maybe think a little Peter Parker-esque here, where he tries to hesitate. He hesitates to ask a girl out in the copy room. The energy for the Goblin here, I feel, as well. I think DeFalco's going for this, like I said, manic, energetic persona for Phil's Goblin. Reminds me a lot of like maybe Robin Williams' Genie from Aladdin, for example. I think Scott McDaniel's great here too. Maybe one of my favorite things I've seen him draw. But I'm in vocal before of being a fan of his work on Nightwing, for example. I've never been the biggest fan of McDaniel on Batman, but I think I might. Yeah, I definitely like this over his Batman, and I think it's when it comes into the colors and the inking, maybe too early to tell. But as for first issues, it's got some pacing issues. It might need to slow down just a little bit, but otherwise, I really like this.
Yeah, I mean, this was a pleasant surprise. I honestly didn't think this was going to be that good, but yeah, I mean, the art's on point. I have not read that stuff from the Clone Saga, so I don't have the background with this character like you do. But um, no, I mean, this is interesting. This is like, obviously a very anti-hero esque type of story going on here, but um, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't. Is this collected at all or no?
Yeah, it
It
is.
is. It is actually. There's a trade of the entire series.
Interesting.
I mean, technically, the character is So for the Clone Saga, we read that there's basically 2 issues in Spider-Man titles that set up the character, and then we read 1 issue of this solo series, which crosses over again. I think the trade is just the series itself, but it exists. I think it's called Green Goblin: A Lighter Shade of Green. That's the subtitle they slapped on for the trade. Yeah, I'm like I mean, it's like half ironic because again, it's stupid '90s comics from Marvel. But like, I'm low key a fan of this series. I think Phil Urich has a really interesting gimmick where, he has his own Uncle Ben. He's got a supporting cast who works at the Bugle, but he's found the Goblin suit. I think it's a weird period for McDaniel because this is between his Daredevil, which is like especially sometime like later on in Daredevil, he was trying to get like experimental, like very blocky style, and then later on, he, like Mike said, he has Nightwing, and I think I kind of like both of those more than this, honestly. But one other thing I will say, particularly for Mike, is that issue 6 of Green Goblin guest stars Daredevil, but it's a misleading cover. On the cover, he's in the red suit, but this is actually a period where Daredevil was back wearing the yellow suit for like some stupid dumb reason. So it's kind of a misleading cover there. But I think he's a cool character, and then he basically got ruined by Dan Slott. Dan Slott made him like a new version of the Hobgoblin.
Yeah, I remember that, and I was not a fan of that at all. So
yeah, he basically becomes a complete villain. Like not even like really anti-hero. He's just like a bad person, and it's not really like set up well, especially if for the 5 people who read this series, where he's just like a slacker, like superhero. Honestly, like very small parts of Failure Green Goblin slightly remind me of like a very bootleg surface level version of Starman, which tiny spoilers we'll talk about later. But like as far as like the very on brand for the era slacker superhero, kind of fits. But our next issue is for me with Aquaman number 11. I actually chose 2 Peter David books. I already talked about Hulk, so here is one of his other celebrated runs in the 1990s. We start here with King Thessaly of Atlantis. He is dead, and he had no heirs, so there's a power vacuum. And there's something going on. There's like earthquakes that are disrupting Atlantis and taking lives and causing instability in society. Aquaman's kind of bastard son, Koryak, who's introduced in this run, wants to help lead Atlanteans to a new home, but Aquaman is convinced something else is going down, but no one will listen to him. Everyone just leaves, and Aquaman sits on the throne alone, and he's kind of cracking up. He's going nuts. But Dolphin was introduced in a random issue of Showcase in like the 70s or something, and then basically never appeared except for like one splash page in Crisis on Infinite Earths with other obscure characters. But as of this run, this Peter David run, she's an Aquaman supporting character. Dolphin ends up staying back with Aquaman, and they have sex. It's just like pretty explicit. I mean, it's not, we don't see things explicitly, but it's explicit that that's what they're doing. And the final page tease has Mara opening the door and walking right in on them. So that should be exciting, for people reading the next issue of this series. And since I can make the direct comparison between two books from the same author, the exact same month, I do think in this case Hulk is much stronger in writing, but also having not previously read a bunch of this Aquaman run, kind of iffy on the art of Martin Egeland, probably pronounced wrong. I forget who the other artist is. I think it's Jim Calafiore, probably also pronounced wrong, but the Peter David Aquaman run, it kind of has like a rotating two-man art team. And I didn't check some of the other issues by the other artists, but kind of underwhelmed on the art here. I'm not sure if sketchy is the right word, but I wish the art felt a little bit more solid. Like, I don't know if that's, like heavier inks or what, but still a great comic overall. Like I said at the top of the show, any random month or year in the 90s, you can, if you're just picking one or two books, you can totally find the diamond in the rough. And pretty much anything you pick from Peter David in this era is going to be one of those diamonds in the rough. And both Hulk and Aquaman fit that brand.
All right. So our next issue here is finishing off my stuff here for DC. So we have Starman number 0, written by James Robinson, art by Tony Harris. So David Knight inherits the mantle of Starman and patrols Opal City. He is the eldest son of Ted Knight, so the original Starman, who fought alongside the JSA during and after World War II. So peering down at the city from a high perch, David is shot by an unseen assassin's bullet. His body plummets to the street below, and then David's brother Jack conducts a day's worth of business at his shop until he receives a telephone call from his father about the news. So anguished, Ted Knight tells Jack that Dave is dead. So fearing that one of his old foes might try to get him as well through his family, Ted took the liberty of leaving one of his old gravity rods in Jack's care. So he tells Jack where the gravity rod is located and tells him to be careful. Ted leaves the observatory en route to claim David's body when suddenly the entire building explodes. Flying pieces of debris knocks Ted in the head. A short distance away, we see a dark-haired woman with, I guess, creepy eyes, kind of looking on. Meanwhile, a tall man with dark sunglasses enters Jack's shop. He asks Jack a string of pretty weird questions, then suddenly reveals himself that he is the one who killed David, and now he plans on killing Jack as well. So the man pulls out a gun and just starts shooting at Jack. Jack manages to make his way into the back of the store where he gets the gravity rod. He uses the rod to fly to safety, and the shop is set on fire for insurance money. I don't know, probably not. Actually, not really at all. The man eventually meets up with this dark-haired woman. Her name, I guess, is Nash, which is actually his sister. And the siblings report their progress to the true architect of the crimes committed to this family, which is known as the Mist. So I know this is the beginning of James Robinson's acclaimed run on Starman. So a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of status quo stuff being established, and just a pretty crazy issue. So I do have both paperback omnibus, not both. I have the first 2 paperback omnibus. I still need to get 3 or 4 or 5 more. Who knows if I'll be able to actually collect them or not, but I thought this was a good issue. James Robinson, pretty on point here with this. So I think everyone's read it, but Mike didn't reread it. But I know Vince has some stuff he wants to say here. So
yeah, the answer is no. You will not be able to get the others because there were 6 of them in hardcover, and then they only released 2 in paperback. And also, if you wanted to have split format, of course, the third hardcover is the hardest of the entire set. However, if you read those 2 paperbacks you have and like them, DC is putting out a compendium that comes out in August, which has it should be only 2 volumes. They're going to be humongous books.
It's going to be huge. They're going to be like 40-issue books.
But if you wanted to upgrade, that would be your choice, or your only choice, really.
And then if he likes that, you can try to track down the Shade trade paperback that was kind of a late companion to the series. That was a new 52 book.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
was just going to say it's great, and now you've taken a step forward into a larger world, and you should definitely read all of it.
What are you, Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it is funny how much the groundwork for the rest of the series is laid here. Now, there's going to be it's going to be a long journey, but I will say that this is not the true first appearance of Jack Knight. It's in one of the issues of 0 Hour.
Yeah, so Starman directly launches out of 0 Hour, so this is actually the first issue of the series, and not just kind of an issue along the way or a side story like almost all of the other 0 issues. So Dan did get all the 0 issues for DC, but he did choose one that's slightly different. This is effectively a number 1. And I think we have read other issues of Starman for Retro, but Dan may not have read those ones specifically. So I forgot that you actually do have those paperbacks, but great first impression, I assume.
Yeah,
you should have the first 30 issues between those 2 paperbacks, something like that. I think the first one's the first 16, 17.
Yeah, I think reading these has definitely bumped this up a little bit more on my list in terms of my reading queue. So,
well, yeah, there you go.
Yep.
It's the first taste of Starman. But I'll go into our final book of the evening, Captain America number 444, the first issue of Mark Waid and Ron Garney's run. And I want to start here by saying we read the final issue of Mark Grunwald's Cap run where Cap died laying in bed with that horrible power armor. This takes place 2 weeks since the Avengers last saw him. So now we open smack dab in the middle of a hostage crisis at the Jefferson Memorial as these power-suited human bomb terrorists have kidnapped the President of the United States, and the only way they are willing to negotiate is to talk to Captain America. Oh no, the big problem is the Avengers are still grieving from Cap's apparent death, that they haven't told the public that Captain America isn't around anymore. So now we get like this awkward sequence of the Avengers dealing with this like government agent liaison guy while Quicksilver tries to run in there and seeing if he can just, quickly disperse all this himself. He, of course, fails. So now the rest of the Avengers are like, well, what else are we going to do? And meanwhile, this government liaison guy is like, hey, you're the Avengers. You should be going out there, but also like questioning why Cap is so important. And this is where the plot device where Waid takes the time to kind of usher in and explain to us, the reader, who's already reading a Captain America comic book, why Cap is great and why he means so much. It's a very, very simple plot device that we've seen before, but it's a product of its time, clearly, but also like the Avengers roster at this time, not great. Eventually, Deathcry is able to find a weakness by the terrorists in their armor where the Avengers strike and save the day. And the now educated agent makes a last-minute save with a throw of Cap's shield, which is there. Earlier, they tried sending in like this Cap impersonator, and it just totally didn't work because the terrorists were able to tell it wasn't. So Black Widow comes clean at the press conference in the aftermath of this incident to tell the public that Cap didn't show up because he was dead. Though, is he really? As we see some shadowy figures saying he isn't, as we see Cap's body presumably being brought back to life in some sort of tube-like mechanical structure. It's all explained in the next issue, but in terms of first issues, this is not a good first issue at all. I did not enjoy this. Ron Garney's art is not great. Vince has some words on that, and I definitely agree with him on what he'll say. But in terms of first issues, I did not enjoy this. It's a Captain America issue with no Captain America. But things get better after this, though. It's just a bad first issue, though, I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. There's no Captain America in this issue of Captain America, but I think it works in kind of hyping him up the whole time. And I don't really know what you would do, because we actually have read the previous issue for some kind of retro show at some point, 443, the end of Grunwald's run, and Cap, quote unquote, dies in that issue. And I don't, this is well before the era where, when a new writer comes on, a new direction, you just slap a new #1 on. So if they did that back then, if it was just a new #1, you could have just had like, oh, he's back alive, let's just jump in. But in this era where that wasn't a thing, like, I don't know how else you would really handle this, because I feel like if you had this long, and also like the story that eventually leads to him dying is literally like a year-long story in Grunwald's run. I mean, it's a crappy story, but when you spend all that time leading to it and then he dies, I feel like you almost need this buffer issue to like really sell it, even if you're going to immediately bring him back. And this is also what struck me reading this again, is that this is one of those cases where a run is definitely tied to its time by the surrounding status quo. You have Deathcry here with the Avengers that immediately dates this, and this is actually literally concurrent with the Crossing. The art is fine, but trust me, I think Ron Garney looks a lot better in the next issue. Maybe it's just that he's actually drawing Captain America, but like if you flip between them, it's like really weird. Like the next issue looks so much better than this one. And maybe that was like a conscious thing where he's like, I'm not even drawing Captain America here. So he was just like, let me just rush this one out, just get the run actually on the road. But yeah, I mean, you can go either way on if this is a good first issue. But this pre-Heroes Reborn Cap run by Mark Waid is really fantastic. So if people are a little bit iffy on this issue, I definitely keep going.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a bad first issue. Things get better right after. So we'll go to picks of the week. We'll bring Dan back. Gentlemen, out of the issues you read, what would be your pick of the week?
Mine would be Starman, but that's kind of cheating because I've, #1, read it countless times. #2, it's like one of my favorite characters and runs. So like runner-up.
I don't think that's cheating, though. It was an option.
Well, yeah, it would be Starman, but just for the hell of it, runner-ups would definitely be some, probably Hulk and then Cap.
Wow, we differ very much on that Captain America issue. I'll go. Dan, do you want to just say Iron Man?
I don't know though. I would say Starman because I feel like it was just a better overall story.
If I had like rigged up confetti, I would set them off that you didn't take Iron Man as a pick of the week. I'm so proud of you right now.
It's like all the Super Bowl shirts that go, to other countries from the team that didn't win the Super Bowl. Don't they get donated or something?
I believe they do.
Yep, that's what it's like.
So with that, I'll take the surprise pick here. I think I'm going to go Legends of the Dark Knight #74 just because it had the staying power of, that was the one that stayed with me and I thought about the most. I actually, like I said, I went off and read the next issue, so nothing in here propelled me to immediately do that unless I've, already done it before. Like I've said, I've read Starman, but I didn't even read it for this show, so in my head wasn't even eligible for me to pick. But I would go second would be Green Goblin, and then third would probably be maybe the Superman issue. But overall, I think it was an experiment. Maybe we'll do a thing again where we do books when we're 5, go every 5-year increments. Maybe something we'll do that again. But overall, it was a fun experiment, but some different returns based on everyone's month and year, though. Certainly, like I said, for Dan, he ended up with 0 month, which is completely different from whatever me and Vince got to choose, obviously. So, and then like I said, the further we go into the 2000s, we're gonna have who knows what crossovers are gonna be running at those respective times as well. But overall, I think it was a fun experiment, though not everything was a winner, would be my takeaway.
True.
Yeah, pretty much.
So with that, we'll go back to regular reviews next week. We'll get back to regular weekly releases. Outside of that, stay safe and tune in next week. We got comic reviews. See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye.